everybody, my name's Eric, and in this episode, we're going to finish off this violin. Stay tuned to the end to see some close-ups and to hear me play it.
Alright guys, we are picking up right where we left off. The sides are done, the top is done, the back is done, the neck is done. They all just have to be assembled together. What you see me doing right now is trimming down these corner blocks and also the end blocks. Now I can't do it all the way until I get the mold off, and I don't want to take that mold off until I get the back on. Reason being, if I don't put the back on first, the sides will likely kind of pop out, spring out. There's a little bit of tension in them. Not too much, but a little bit, and I do not want that to mess with the shape. So I know that the shape right now is correct. I'm just going to glue it on. You can see I put a lot of glue on each of the blocks, but also on the linings that we put in. That lining was just a glue doubler. So I'm going to line it up and make sure that it's correct. And I'm just using pencil marks here. I know a lot of people have pins or they use small nails or something or other, but for me, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't mess with the wood any more than it is, and I just did some pencil marks, and I got it lined up perfectly fine. I'm just going to take this little palette knife here, this putty knife, and open up these blocks from the mold. So they're currently stuck on with a tiny dab of hide glue, actually a little bit more than a tiny dab. Right here I make a mistake, and I don't get it too much on camera, but I actually go through the sides. I had enough force. But it's a very small crack, and I just fixed it up with a little bit of CA glue, and I used some wood glue with some sawdust as a filler, and that cleaned it up really nice. And so I can finally pop this off the mold, and this had been on there since day one, so taking this off is a big step forward. Next thing to do is for me to make the linings and glue those in, so I did that off camera because you'd already seen me make the linings before. And so yeah, just a little bit of hide glue on those, and then these clothespins to clamp it on. I know some people, they cut their clothespins off a little bit, like they have the length on the biting side. It like increases the force you have on it. I just don't think it's really that necessary. This has plenty of force to clamp these up. If I was, anything small enough to clamp with a clothespin like that, I think that force is already justified. And so now I have to flatten it off, so I'm using the sandpaper on a flat piece of table, and then I am slowly taking it down there. There's a taper to it as well. The back is taller than the top. And so I'm also now drilling out the button for the end pin. And there was a little bit of a breakthrough on the end, but it's on the inside, and I sanded it down, and it looks all right. And this is the label. So I use a normal piece of printer paper. Maybe that is sacrilegious or something. I don't know. It works fine. I can tell you now it's been a year. That's held on there perfectly fine. There's no signs of it lifting up. I'm using the hot hide glue just like the rest of the instrument is assembled with. And I also pat it down, although I don't think I show that on camera. But the glue is impregnated into the paper, and it's into the wood as well. And so this is what it looks like before I seal it up. You notice there's a small little pencil mark there. That's for the sound post. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But that is so that I know where the sound post should be once I seal this whole thing up. Speaking of sealing it up, here we are. I have a piece of masking tape going around the sides because previously when I did the back, I had a big problem with the glue having dried up, and trying to get that off was not a pleasant experience. So I wanted to make that go as smoothly as I possibly could by putting the masking tape on so I could just peel it off while the glue was kind of malleable still. It turns into like a jelly like consistency where it's not going to flow or run on you, but I can peel the masking tape off in like 30 minutes or not even, and that'll be good. So again, I use my clamps, I flip it over. Some people might say this isn't enough clamps. Excuse me, maybe it's not, but it was enough for me. And again, it's been over a year now. Well, I guess not quite over a year, but almost a year now. We're coming up on it, and the violin is still held together. Well, look at this. I mean, this is the culmination of, a year of work, and it actually looks like a violin at this point. So the next thing to do is put on the neck. And so that's going to involve cutting out this complicated dovetail joint up at the top. Oh, just look at it. I'm sorry. Just seeing it again. It always brings joy to my heart. So, as I said, the neck joint is next. So I marked it out in pencil. I made a lot of careful measurements, made sure I had the center line proper, and I marked out roughly what the neck joint should be. Now, this is a very complicated joint, and I am not skilled enough in communication to explain it in words, but I'll do my best here. It is a dovetail joint. It's tapered, so it's like a guitar. If you know how a guitar neck is set, imagine that, except it is all the way out to the ends. It is also tapered like a dovetail. So the lines are not straight, so those lines that are on either side are not parallel to each other. They are angled, so they're angled outwards, so they get further apart going down the violin. So that means that it is a dovetail joint, and it does hold really positively even when there's no glue in it, which is a very important feature of the joint. And so right now, I'm taking up the material of the top that there needs to be, and I scored the line so I can just break it out like that. And then I'll have to mark the sides of this going down. So you'll see what I mean. It's angled like that. It connects down to that button. So I'll explain this now. The logic behind this joint is that there are 3 major gluing surfaces. There are the 2 sides, and there's the button. The largest surface, being that large trapezoidal area, is actually not a valuable glue joint. And the reason for that is that you're gluing to the end grain of the neck. So you're not getting a strong joint if you're gluing to that. The button and the sides of the walls are very, very important. That's why those walls are a dovetail joint, is so that you have that positive fit, and it's not going to pull out. Well, it's not going to pull out at the bottom the way the strings are tensioning it. It would kind of bow inwards. And so you see, I scored the sides, and I'm carefully taking this down with a chisel. And that button is much bigger than it needs to be, but I'm going to take that down later. As you can see what it roughly looks like, and then after a significant amount of cleanup later, you can see what it is. So taking it down with files, you can see how I was just inching up on that, and then I'll do some more fit up work to get it to sit flush with that. So that was not how it is. That's not what it looked like going into this glue up. I did a little bit more work to make it sit perfectly flat, but you could see how closely I was inching up on that measurement. And so with a little bit of glue, again, the joint holds very tightly without any glue in it or any clamp, but you put the glue in and then you just do a clamp just to make sure it doesn't shift on you. There's a lot you're controlling with this, many different angles and depths and lengths that you have to keep track of, and I cannot explain it all in this video, but there are plenty of other people on YouTube who have done a great job at explaining it, and it took me a lot of time to get that neck joint to sit properly and have all of the right angles and measurements. And you can see what I said before, I'm just whittling down that button into the shape. It is a little bit bigger than it probably should be. I honestly can't tell you why. I remeasured everything, and everything seems to measure correctly, except for the button. But that's not how math works. It doesn't add up. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know. It's playable. I've, sent it out to multiple musicians to have them try it out, and they all seem to think it isn't awkward or weird, but something is wrong with it, or wacky at the very least. You can see me gluing in the nut here. This was an ebony blank. I had shaped it down to this state, but it does need to come down a little bit more. It's a little tall. Here's the saddle. This also was a blank. It still had some of the shaping, but I did have to reshape most of it to get it down to what I liked. And it's a similar thing down at the bottom that it was for the neck joint, except we're not going all the way through the block. We're just going through the top plate and exposing a little bit of the block. So do the same thing as before, and again, I score the sides so I can just rip it out like that. And after a little bit of cleanup, we'll get a nice joint to glue to. So this is it. There's not a huge amount of surface area here, but also the force that this is experiencing is pushing it into the joint. So there's shouldn't be anything that's really pushing it out. The glue is there to stabilize it. It's not going to be a good saddle if it's not glued in, but this is enough surface area, at least I do believe. Something to note is that it's not a perfectly snug fit going left to right here in this camera view, because if it is, when the wood shifts, the ebony shrinks less than the spruce, and so the spruce can end up splitting if you have it too tight of a joint. So there's a little bit, tiny bit of a gap to allow for that. And you can see here, I took the fingerboard off. I also accidentally took the nut off in the process, but I put that back on in a very similar fashion to before. And I taped off the areas that don't get the varnish. Now, there is a lot to be said for varnishing, and I'm not getting into this whole discussion. What I'll tell you is that I used tried and true wood varnish. So it is a oil varnish. It is, I believe, a polymerized linseed oil. So this is not a linseed oil that you would like rub into a butcher's block if you had like a linseed or a tung oil that absorbs into the wood and just sits inside the pores. This is a oil that cures. So it sits on the surface, and under exposure to UV light, it hardens into kind of a plasticky varnish. I mean, that's what it is. It's a varnish, not an oil finish. So it goes on very, very light, and I have it in cheesecloth here. You can see it really does bring out the color in the wood. It really makes the grain pop, and I love it. All right, it is not nearly as robust of a finish as some others, but that was my problem with the traditional violin varnishes, is that they were just too thick. And reading around online, it seems like that really kills the sound. And the luthiers are like, oh, we'll just, give it a few decades for the varnish to wear through a little bit and it'll sound great again. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Just go with a lighter varnish to begin with. I still think that this will be robust enough. I still think that it will hold up, but it's not going to hurt the sound, and I think it looks really good as well. So no tint to it. I really want the natural color of the cherry and the spruce top to show. So no staining, no any of that, and I might get a lot of pushback for that, but I think it turned out really nice as a result. I just look at that. So I have it, sitting in the sunlight here. I let it sit like 24 hours between coats, and I take the quadruple lot steel wool, and I would lightly go over it. And nothing really, not too much came up on when I did this. It's just burnishing the surface, really. And so I would do that, put another coat on, and I did that 4 times, I believe. If I did have to do this again, I would do more coats, though, especially on the top. Because even though I sanded the top, it still it doesn't fill or, kind of smooth out any of the grain. So the spruce is a tiny bit more rough than the back or the sides, just because it's a softer wood, so it followed like the annual rings more. Anyways, that's it for the varnishing. Now it's time for the sound post. So this is a very important piece of hardware in this instrument. It allows for the sounds to be transferred from the top to the back. And you can see I have this end scope here that lets me peer inside the instrument, and you can see my pencil marks on the top and on the bottom. And that's about where I want it lined up. Now, ultimately in the instrument, this is going to be a little bit back from the foot of the bridge, from the treble foot of the bridge. On the bass side, we have the bass bar. On the treble side, we have the sound post. So the bass bar kind of acts as a spring. The sound post acts as a kind of a fulcrum, I guess you could say, if you're considering this like a seesaw. So anyways, you can see here I'm using my end scope to carefully locate where the sound post is going. I'm using this tool here. So initially I put it in, I just stabbed this into the sound post. This is how it's done, and slotted it in. Once I did that, I was able to pull it out from that slot, and now I'm using this hook section to pull, push, and slide side to side this sound post into the correct position. Now, I know those marks are accurate, but I am also going by feel. So as I'm trying to put it in, it's going to start to be tight, but then once it slots into place, assuming that I have carved everything correctly, because it has to match the top and bottom contour, it's going to loosen up, and it's going to more or less almost snap into place. I mean, it's not snapping into place, but there's a point where there's a lot of tension, and then it kind of releases. And you don't want there to be a huge amount of tension, or at least this is what I've read. You don't want there to be a huge amount of tension when you put it in. Without any strings or anything on it, the sound post should be almost loose. There should be some level of positive tension, but not a lot. And so I was really feeling for that, and I had to redo this multiple times, and it was very tricky to make sure I got it out without it falling and getting stuck inside the instrument. But I did it. I would try it. I would feel that, oh, this is way too tight. I take it out. I take a little bit off, or I change the contours and the bevels, and then I try again. So this is the successful attempt. And you can see, I think I get a little greedy here, and yeah, I just pushed it out again. So again, it just didn't feel quite right. But when I reset that there, that felt like it was it, and it was. This is the bridge. I did carve this. I didn't tidy it up maybe as much as I should have, but there's a lot of work that was done to this, and I didn't capture it all on video, or maybe I did. I just didn't put it into the episode because it was getting rather long, and there are plenty of videos on this online. So it finally has come time to string this up. There's a lot I glossed over. I had to reshape some of the pegs. There's the reaming of the peg holes with the peg hole reamer. I had to reshape a lot of the tailpiece actually because I had got this as a cheap kit. The tailpiece and the tuning pegs that is, and they just weren't. I don't know. They weren't shaped right. There was something very wonky about them. So, excuse me again. I had to fix them up a little bit, and I think they turned out nice in the end. So, okay, that was me being a little bit silly there. I should have gotten a little less tension on it and then put on the E string. So I start with the G string, then I put on the E string to stabilize the bridge. And after that, I get everything, then I can slowly bring things up to tension. But I'm not bringing one string all the way up to tension first, just enough to keep the bridge stable. And I'm lucky the sound post didn't fall out when I did that, actually. That was good fortune. I am using Presto tonicas on this, I believe. And they had a gold E string. Now, it's not actually a gold E, but it's supposed to have a sound similar to what a golden E string would sound like. At least that's, I don't know if you believe the marketing. But that's what I went with, and I think it did turn out pretty nicely. So, all right, I think this is going to end here, and then you're going to see some images of it, and I'll see you for the demo.
All right, everybody, I'm gonna play this now, but I am not a violinist, so don't judge it too hard. I'm going to get a real violinist to play it in the next episode, so hit that subscribe button so you can see that. All right, there's gonna be a Shokin's Farewell, or the best that I can play it, take 16. Let's try again, take 17, guys. You don't know how long I've been waiting for that to work. All right, guys, again, please subscribe. I've loved having you through this entire series. It's meant a lot to me. There's so many of you now, and you guys have left very encouraging comments. So if you want to hear this played by an actual violinist and hear its full potential, then again, hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much. Love you all. Stay safe. Goodbye.